Tree Talking Time is brought to you by Conkeys Outdoors. Get all your hound hunting needs at conkeys.com. Welcome to Tree Talking Time, where we talk all things tree dogs, from the smallest fights to the largest hounds, treating squirrels to bears and everything in between. And from time to time, we might even run a little fast game. Need reliable housing for your animals? Animal Housing Solutions in Mayo, Florida builds custom coops, kennels, and shelters that are strong, durable, and designed with your animal's comfort in mind. Whether you need a large-scale kennel or a small custom chicken coop, they've got you covered. Quality craftsmanship, great service, and solutions built to last. That's the Animal Housing Solution promise. Check them out at Animal Housing Solutions on Facebook. Animal Housing Solutions, where your animals come first. Welcome back to another episode of Tree Talking Time. This is another episode from the vault. That is because me and my wife just had a baby. Well, she had a baby. But now that he's here, we have a baby. So, his name is Cooper. He's doing well. My wife is doing well. I know there's several people that know about him and have offered congratulations. I really appreciate that. And all the well wishes and prayers and all of that. So, but with having a new baby, it's just kind of put the podcast a little bit on the back burner as we kind of readjust to life with an infant. You know, some sleepless nights here lately. So I'm sure we will be getting back into some new content very soon, but at least for this week and maybe another week or two, and maybe even a few sprinkled in over the next several months, we're going to have some from the vaults. You know, there's a lot of people that have come on to listening to this podcast since the beginning that have never went back and listened to those early ones, or even if you have listened to them, sometimes it's good to re-listen. So we're going to bring back some of the popular ones or my favorite ones, you know, and just kind of not miss a week necessarily. So that's kind of what's going on. This episode is with Rex Bowers. I kind of sprung this podcast on Rex a couple years ago, and just kind of wanted to get to more information from him. I had heard a lot about Rex and obviously knew he was heavily involved in the early days of the Leopard breed, and so wanted to get him on and kind of just pick his brain and hear some of the stories and hear what he had to say. And since then, Rex has become a tremendous source of information, and I really appreciate all the time and effort he's given to me and to others in this breed. Kind of like the podcast a few weeks ago with John Jackson, Rex is like our breed historian with the Leopard dogs, and from multiple accounts that I've heard, Rex has a huge library of information. You know, he's told me that, and so have several other people. So just want to kind of try and preserve some of that with these podcasts. And so it kind of brings up a point of, if you know somebody like John or like Rex that has a lot of information, whether it be on a certain line of dogs or a certain breed of dogs, make sure you reach out and let me know. I would love to have those kinds of people on. I love the history of tree dogs, and people that have invested this much time and effort are just so much fun to talk to, and to hear the passion in their voice and hear them talk about their breed or their line of dogs. And so I would love to talk to them. So if you know somebody, definitely reach out. Always looking for good suggestions. Also, that kind of brings up a point about full cry. You know, a lot of people have been asking about it, and I understand 100%. I really do. If I didn't know, I would be the same boat. So, but I keep been getting asked a lot about when's it coming out. Well, this issue is at the printer right now. With that said, this issue took a lot longer to produce than I anticipated. I do apologize. There was a lot of things behind the scenes that just took longer than I realized, and a lot of it I didn't have control over. One of the big hang-ups was some shipping stuff with the United States Postal Service. You know, governmental agencies are not always the most speedy. And I will say we would probably be still dead in the water if it was not for a guy named Kevin. So everybody out there, thank Kevin, because we would probably still be waiting. if it was not for him. So I really appreciate all the help he gave to me in getting this magazine back up and running. And so it's at the printer. I know if we are scheduled, it's a pretty quick turnaround. But unfortunately, because of the delays, we were scheduled weeks ago. And so we're not on the schedule for right this second. So I'm not exactly sure when they're going to be able to get it printed and shipped. I would imagine within the next week to 2 weeks. Like I said, if when we are scheduled, it's a very quick turnaround, but we're kind of working around the other things that are scheduled to be printed. So we're kind of taking a backseat just because of the delays. But I would imagine that within the next couple weeks, we should be shipping out this first issue. It is a late March, April issue. Like I said, it was supposed to be out weeks ago. It was going to be late no matter what, but not this late. And so the May-June issue will be a hair late as well, and just because of the time this one is taken, and then I'm hoping by July we're on schedule again and getting out at the beginning of the cycle. So with all of that, I would, and kind of tying back into the history, would love for anybody that is interested in writing, in submitting photos, to get a hold of me. Definitely want to talk to representatives from all the breed associations, from all the different registries, and we want your information. We want to be able to publish it. Yes, the internet makes everything instant and free and easy. I understand that. But the problem with the internet is it's here today and it's gone tomorrow, especially social media. I'm sitting here looking at 2 bookshelves just full of full cry magazines, and that's not even the full archive yet. And I can go back and look at articles from the 60s and the 70s, 80s, all the way up through the 2000s and up until the last several years, and it's just to be able to go back and look at that information is invaluable to me, and I know it is for a lot of other people. So the good thing about that is, unlike social media, these magazines will be around for years to come. I know my local coon club, you walk in there is a table full of different magazines, from full cries to coonhound bloodlines to cooners. So you can sit down and you can go back and look through these old issues, and you can see dogs that won in the past. You can see the articles written by people. You can see the breeders. You can see those stud dog ads, and it's just a snapshot of a time in history, and it's full of information. So definitely urge you guys to contribute to the magazine. It's one of the things that I know the Doobies really struggled with, and I'm sure the Terry Walker and his team struggled with as well. As we've moved more digital, people stopped pushing things to the magazines, and so we definitely want good quality contributors. And there are some guidelines, but I'm more than happy to work with anybody that is interested in submitting content. We can try to figure it out. Whether that's also if you're not a writer and if you're not really sure how to, or you don't feel comfortable submitting an article, but you have an interesting story, or somebody interesting, or have a topic that you would like covered, reach out. There are a few writers that I have that can write articles. So whether that's calling you and interviewing you about an interesting story you have, or reaching out to a breeder that you personally know and want to have interviewed, that kind of stuff. So definitely reach out. My email for anything Full Cry related is ben@fullcrymag.com. So shoot me an email. I'd love to chat. We can figure it out. all you breed associations definitely want you guys to come back to and have an article in each issue. I think it's very important for your breeds, and so if you're a member of a breed association, make sure you're having somebody from the association reach out and submit an article. So I know, like I said, this episode's Rex Bowers, another leopard dog man. We had a leopard podcast last week. This is kind of me just getting ready for leopard days. In my head, I'm pretty excited about leopard days. I don't know if I'm going to make it this year or not with the baby, but we'll see. And even if I can't make it, I hope you can. And if you're interested in it, it is April 23rd, 24th, and 25th, 2026 in Michigan. All the information is on ukcdogs.com or on the American Leopard Breeders Association Facebook page. So I hope you can make it if you're interested in leopards. Like I said, I would love to be there. Just not sure that's going to happen this year with the baby. If it was not for the new baby, it was definitely on the list of places to be this year. So, but without further ado, here's the issue from the vault with Rex Bowers. Thank you. Just wanted to talk about some leopards.
I'll try and help you. I don't know if I can.
Oh, I think
if I'm qualified to give you the
you are absolutely the
most
most qualified I think there is to talk about leopards that's alive today.
Well, I'm not that old.
I know you're not. I'm not saying you're that old. I'm just saying that, other than Richard McDuffie and maybe some of the other, maybe Odile Bennett, there's not too many other people that were around when the breed was formed and are still involved. And
that's true.
So
it's true. It's kind of days gone by in a lot of ways, but I've not been involved with any of the hunts or kept up with who's breeding what or anything in quite a few years.
Oh, I follow all the current stuff. That's not important. Anybody can find that out. The history and stuff is what I'm interested in. There's not a good book like there is on plots.
Is there still a Leopard Cur Association that does a yearbook?
They no longer do a yearbook. The American Leopard Cur Breeders Association is still in existence.
The registration office part of it.
That's the registration office, and that's the only thing that has anything to do with the cur side, other than the Blue Ridge Club, which the Blue Ridge Club is a standalone club that's not associated with anybody.
Well, it was to start with.
Yeah, I'm just saying at this point they're not.
Right. I don't know how many years, been maybe 10 years or so ago, but it started out, it was, a section of the National Association.
Henry
a
was
while too,
telling me a little bit of that when I was down there at that hunt.
Yeah, that was kind of a long time ago, but out of a thing down here called the Leopard Tree Dog Association, which was
I've heard about it.
Splintered from started in the mid-'70s, really the same people as in the National Association. They just disgruntled with people in the Midwest for one reason or another and started that. But it kind of turned into a split in the across the country.
Okay.
And one thing and another, and Richard McDuffie quit registering his dogs with them too. And I kind of got a group of people together one year to meet at my house and discuss having a hunt here that represented the National Association, because at that time you had to have that to have a voice in the National Association's decisions and things of that nature, and that's how that got started.
How long did you have the LTD?
Leopard Tree Dog? It's from, I believe, 74 till, I may not be exact on that about looking exact dates. My memory's not as good as it should be, but it lasted into a little 2002, something like that.
Oh, wow.
Still had a hunt.
Gotcha.
Yeah, early 2000s, maybe a year or two later than that.
I didn't realize it lasted that long.
Have to look to get it did. O'Neill quit the registration office part of it. I think O'Neill quit registering dogs in like 96 and 97.
Gotcha.
I've got that at my house, but it he hadn't registered dogs in any year, several years. But
Yeah.
as far as the association and the group of people met down there at the Leopard Den, that went on for several years until the 2000s. I don't exactly remember the last year I went down there, but
I've heard about those hunts
don't
down
seem
there.
that long ago, you know.
Yep.
Have you been down there?
No, I have. This was the first year I went down to the Blue Ridge Club, but Richard Bailey up in Michigan told me a little bit about the Leopard Den and going to those hunts back in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, Richard goes way back.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess he's still got dogs. I talked to him a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, he's had leopards
since the late 60s.
Longer than anybody I often think of. Lamar Meeks, he's had dogs for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Lamar, I met him early 70s down at hunt we had Southeastern Sectional in Lumberton, and I don't think I saw him again for 20 years. He registered his dogs with NKC for a long time.
Yeah.
And didn't come to those hunts, on a regular basis. I'm sure he had a big operation going. And then after a while, he kind of got back, and like a lot of other people, and ACBA registered his dogs, with the Leopard Cur Breeders Association. But it's been one way or another in different things in the Leopard Tree Dog office. If a person was to look at it, I mean, it's basically identically the same dogs. Most of the people in the Midwest and Ohio and Illinois and Indiana registered their dogs, that were ACBA registered them with the LTDA.
Yeah.
Probably the majority of dogs in that registration office were from the Midwest.
Really?
Really?
I just would have thought being down North Carolina, it would have been more the Carolina bred dogs.
Well, everybody down here, with a few exceptions, registered them. I kept mine registered with both offices.
Okay.
Through the years, and Billy Stiles did as well. But
gotcha. Most
of the people that were in that original group down there did not. When they started the LTD, they quit registering their dogs with the American Leopard Cur Breeders office with Billy Williams on. And most people quit. And like I say, it's one reason I started that Blue Ridge thing was to get people back together, because they were basically breeding the same breed of dog.
Well, even now, you've got the UKC registered dogs, and then, there's still a few people that are breeding dogs registered with the ALCBA.
Well, that's what I was asking. I mean, I've got one dog. She's full-blooded out of my stuff all the way back, and I've got UKC papers. I think I registered the second UKC dog when we started that. I think Reggie Schneider was the first. Pretty sure Reggie registered the first with UKC. Mm-hmm. And I registered mine second. And I was, I thought that was the thing to do all along, but that's when they were UKC registered them as curs, not leopard hounds.
Yep.
There's always been, a variety in that breed. There's always been ball mouth, long-eared hound dogs.
Mm-hmm. I've told people that, like, I've been involved with leopards for, 5 or 6 years now, and anytime anybody asks, they're like, oh, is there a breeder, in whatever their state or whatever? I'm like, it doesn't matter what state you're in. I said, look for the type of dog you want, because there's so much variety within this breed.
Always has been. It's always been like that. Mm-hmm. At one time, the people that was in that Leopard Tree Dog Association, we hunted together and kind of hunted the same territory, and probably had a group of people that had a strain of dog or semi-strain of dog that were maybe a little less houndier than some of those in Missouri, but most of all, the talk about those being all hound out there was more talk.
Yeah.
When you got right down to it, they weren't that much different.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say that's true today. I mean, some of them are no different than a Trend Walker or a Black and Tan hound.
I would say between 2008 and the present, something happened.
Yeah.
What? I don't know, but I think
a lot of outside blood.
Yep.
A lot of outside blood. I mean, those people did that in every breed there's ever been, I guess. Put something in them, but there's a lot of outside competition type hounds in these leopard hounds. It's pretty easy to see.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree, and that's why for somebody that's looking for more of those old style cur dogs, it's getting harder to find those dogs unless you know where to look.
Well, I don't. I did it one time. I really don't know who's got what now. I've had a lot of health issues. And just not able to hunt except what hunting I do behind my house.
Yeah.
I go to the woods in the wintertime every day, right out my back door.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a coon dog, and I've got one coon dog, and I've got one fox dog.
Okay.
My leopard cur, she's getting old, but when I turn her loose, probably 5 mornings a week, she goes and runs rabbits to stay in shape. But she's a hard tree dog. Okay. If she sees I'm going to look for a coon, she'll go get treed.
Now she goes back to all your stock?
Yeah, she's full-blooded.
Okay.
Dutchman Creek for generations. Mm-hmm. Out of the last female I had, I raised pups and a Wayne Hensley male.
Okay.
Just a couple generations back to.
Yep. I hunt with Wayne,
right
and I actually bred a female to one of Wayne's males, and so I've seen some of his papers, and everything in his kennel pretty much goes back to your stock with a very few outcrosses.
I think he might have bred to one of Brandon Thompson's dogs.
Yep. That's the only outcross he's made, and then his Mike dog that he has now is out of a male from John Miles, but John Miles' stock all goes back to Brandon's, and then actually the female that I took and bred was from Brandon as well. So the only 3 outcrosses that have ever been made into his line have all been on like Glade Creek stock.
Yeah, I hunted with Wayne's brother, Lewis Hensley. He was one of the very first leopard cur breeders.
Yep.
In the early 60s. I had litter mate to Nimrod, and had a dog called Calico that come originally from Ross Porter in Iowa through Dan Reeves, and then they kind of got out of it and met Wayne, and I kind of had it determined that I was going to let Wayne have the best of whatever I had, because I knew his brother and got to know him, and let him have the best that I had.
No, I really like Wayne, and I like hunting with him, and I jokingly call him Uncle Wayne now.
Uncle Wayne.
Yep.
I tell you what, I haven't talked to Wayne. I haven't talked to Brandon. I just had a lot of things going on other than coon hunting and coon dogs, and just haven't kept in touch with the leopard cur world. But
I understand.
I'm not that far from Wayne. I'm about maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours.
Okay. I thought it was a little further than that. Now, you've had leopards, like you said, the Dutchman Creek line of dogs for a long time. Where did you get your start in leopards?
I believe I got a dog out of O'Neill Bennett's Buck and Black Gal. I put her pictures in Full Cry.
I did see that now that you mentioned it. Yep. I've enjoyed your recent articles that you've been putting in there.
I've got a lot of old pictures. I'm not on the internet. I think I had the first cur website ever put up. Okay. But I never did nothing with it and got out of it. But I've got a lot of. Richard McDuffie let me copy his photo album.
Okay.
It had been in 1995 when I had that first Blue Ridge hunt. And I copied every photograph that he had. But, for years I didn't, this might sound bad, but a lot of people would like to have them for wrong reasons. I hope that doesn't sound bad. But,
no.
But anyway, I thought, if I don't share them somewhere with somebody, I'll pass away and it'll just be in boxes in here in my house. So I thought I'd put some of those photos out there and tell a little bit.
No, I've really enjoyed those articles.
But I got my first dog. It was out of, I didn't get him from O'Neill. I got him from a man by the name of Bruno Werlo. It was just a dog trader. But James Myers owned him when I first hunted with him.
Okay. And
I had a couple other leopard curs. And James lived in Salisbury. But and a fellow that I hunted dogs for, I'm just a young boy at the time, didn't have no money or anything, but told me that he knew a dog trader that had 2 leopard curs just like the ones I talked about. So we went to see this man, and sure enough, he did have them.
Nice.
And Daddy bought me a Ranger for my birthday. I guess I was 14 years old.
Okay. You were young.
And I grew up around dogs. I'd had beagles and grade hounds and, tree dogs. I've been around dogs since I was big enough to breathe. That's the first, and he was a pretty powerful coon dog. Was then, still is in my mind now. I've not seen many in all these years. It was better than him. I mean, he was just a lot of those dogs. I look back at it, and and knew a lot of people tried to breed and improve on those first dogs, and I don't know. I've seen dogs that were more suitable for the hunting that territory we have, and I've seen dogs, I'm sure, that would win competition hunts and maybe look better one way or another, but I've not seen better dogs as far as treeing a lot of coons and getting the job done than I did first few years I was acquainted with them.
You're not the only person that I've heard that from. I've heard that from quite a few old timers that have had these dogs for 30 plus years that have had said there were some better dogs back then.
Oh, they were extraordinary dogs. Extraordinary dogs. I believe the first ones I ever hunted with that went to Lumberton were Noah Leggett's.
Okay.
Wayne Rogers. And my Ranger dog, I mean, the people that had coon dogs around here, the hounds, and they weren't just all country coon dogs. They were Grand Night champion, Plots and Walkers. But I mean, my dog didn't take a back seat to none of them, but he sure didn't outrun those down there. Of course, I wasn't used to hunting in swamp country, but everybody down there, just due to the terrain, hunt right off the tailgate, which we don't do around here. You've seen this country here. It's, hills and hollers and miles between bridges and just walking it. But not that way down there, but have, that country down there demand, to have a dog that hunt hard and wide like that. And, there's a lot less coon in a lot of country back then. Had to have a lot of go in a dog. I tell people for the first 3 generations, I bred dogs to hunt harder and wider, and then I spent the rest of my life trying to come up with dogs that handled and hunted closer.
That's funny.
And I guess now we got all this technology, you can go back to, you can train any kind of dog to hunt any way you want.
Yeah, that's just funny how...
What do you have? You say you got Wayne's? You got dogs out of Wayne's dogs?
I've got 2 females from Brandon, and then I bred a female to one of Wayne's males. So I've got a female pup out of that.
And where do you live at?
I live in Pennsylvania.
I used to go to Pennsylvania every fall and hunt for a week.
Where'd you hunt up here?
Around Lebanon. Man owned a furniture business up there by the name of Bob Hoke.
Okay.
That I got to know. And he put us up for a week. And hunted with a guy by the name of Chick Bordner that trained field dogs in a big way, field trial dogs.
Okay.
And we spent several days every year at a cross-country ski resort. Maybe a couple hours from Lebanon, a place called Eaglesmere. You know where that might be?
I know where Lebanon is.
That ski resort's a pretty good little trip from Lebanon. We hunted all around there, too, on those national forests or state forests, I guess they were.
Yeah, we have
a lot of big timber, big timber, compared to what we got here. But we went to that ski resort and stayed in this man's lodge, a cross-country ski resort, and hunted all over his cross-country ski trails.
Nice.
Yeah, he had a big, lodge right on the mountaintop, and horse stables. Of course, they had trail riding and everything else there. But he was good friends with, Bob, so he'd put us up every year. But that's some of the best coon hunting I've ever done in my life. We'd tree 15, 20 coon every night. Of course, we'd hunt all night to do it. But some of the best coon hunting I've ever done was in Pennsylvania.
Well, I'm down here in a corner where there's a ton of people, so you'd have to jump. You're either treeing a lot of, pop-up coon right along the edge of fields, or you'd be hunting a lot of different spots in order to tree that many coons in one night, right here by my house.
Well, we went, now where Bob lived, his house bordered a state forest. Mm-hmm. It's got on a little mountain range right there east of Lebanon.
Yep.
And you could hunt as long as you wanted to hunt back there in that timber.
Oh, yeah, I mean, the rest of the
state. We hunted some around Hershey.
Okay.
We hunted some cornfield country down around Hershey and treated a lot of coons down there. But the best hunting we done was up next to the Blue Mountain, as they called it. I don't know if that was actually the Blue Ridge or not. It would be cornfields and farmland, and when you got up in the timberline, it was all forest. Mm-hmm. And Chick Bordner, they didn't shoot a coon. He clumb up in those trees with a pistol to shoot the coons or either shake them out. He was a real tree climber. He always lit a cigar and smoked it when he went up in the tree. These people were real coon hunters. I mean, they didn't 3-hour hunt or something. I take a lot of short hunts.
Yeah.
All my life. But now those guys, I mean, we'd hunt till it was daylight every night.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
We really did tree the coons. May not be that way now. That's been early 80s, I guess I did that.
Like I said, I think the biggest problem is just the land's not there like it used to be. There's a lot of people moved out from cities, so even Lebanon, it's pretty grown up around there, and there's still farms up there, don't get me wrong, but nothing like there used to be.
Well, it's just all messed up down here. I had 15, 20 places I could be to in a few minutes and hunt.
Yeah.
It's golf courses and housing developments.
Yep.
Just everywhere. And, a mile or two of me everywhere. And I live on the land, been in my family for 4 generations, and that's all chopped up and sold off, and neighbors I don't even know,
Yep. Nah, it's everywhere.
If I didn't live right here on the creek, creek's, just right in my backyard, a couple hundred yards, and you can still go out the back door here at my house and hunt. But all the land around here's changed hands and developed. It changes hunting, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. So after those first couple dogs, your first couple leopards, did you stick with leopards, or I don't know? I read somewhere, and it might be not true, but I read something that said that you had crossed in like mountain cur and foxhound and.
Well, I have.
Okay.
I've had probably more good plots than most plot breeders have had, but I've never raised any plots, and I've never personally crossed a leopard on a plot, although a lot of them, basically, that's what they are.
I have an accident one of those.
There's nothing wrong with that. I've led a lot of bear hunters. Most of the dogs I sold for many years were the bear hunters. Mm-hmm. They get half the litter when they come, and a lot of them had plot bear dogs. Mm-hmm. Bear hunters really like those leopards because they could run all day, every day, and they didn't tire their feet up.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't understand that, but unless you do that, you can't. Plus they're enough of a running dog they can run, mm-hmm. and they're enough of a bay dog to make good bear dogs. Not suicidal, gritty. Most of them are not, but I guess the mountain cur cross that people now. If you've looked at those articles I wrote in Full Cry, I put the pictures in there of 2 dogs Richard McDuffie had called Curly and Steady. Mm-hmm. And Richard got those 2 dogs from Dewey Ledbetter.
Okay.
There's pure Ledbetter mountain curs, could exist. Mm-hmm. Because when he started, I copied some of those old columns he wrote for the Mountain Cur Breeders Association before it turned into the American Cur Breeder Association. He had those 2 Dewey Ledbetter mountain curs, and his partner down there had a dog called Dagwood. There's no breed behind it. It's not leopard colored.
Okay.
It's in the history of leopard curs and in the pedigree of especially the leopard curs around here. It's in my breeding for sure. Mm-hmm. But and the first cross that Richard made, to my knowledge, before he got Nimrod, Elrod, and Jezebel and Flicka, they bred that Dagwood dog to that Dewey Ledbetter mountain cur.
Okay.
To study. And that's where Leggett's Caroline come from. It's in the pedigree of all of my leopards and Wayne Hensley's leopards and anybody, all the modern day McDuffie string leopards, all of them trace back through my Sam and my Cleo dog.
Yep.
And right back to this, and those were the very first dogs I hunted with down there were Noah Leggett's dogs, and those dogs looked different because they had a lot of brindle on them and a rougher look than a lot of them. They weren't as houndy. It took me a few years to figure out they had that mountain cur in them, and then they had that grade cur dog, whatever he was. Mm-hmm. It looked like he might have been part plot, maybe a little bit of shepherd or retriever, or who knows.
Yeah, a little bit of a longer coat.
Anyway, those dogs had Ledbetter mountain cur in them, and they bred Nimrod to Curly. So, and Dagwood to Stubby. So those early crosses carried 2 crosses of mountain cur, and out of all the leopards, those are the ones I liked.
Okay, cool.
So I got it in my mind in the 70s that I was going to do the same thing Richard had done with the Ledbetter mountain cur. And I'd also found a dog up in the mountains up here. It come from Wayne's brothers that didn't have papers on it. It was when Tom Gibbon and Richard looked at the dog, said, well, he's out of Hensley's Calico. It looks just like him. And he did, but didn't have no papers. But anyway, I had him and had a sound dog that I got from Vernon Leggett. But anyway, I bought a mountain cur from Robert Kimmer. I walked his place over and looked for the tallest, longest-legged thing he had, because in my opinion, his dog couldn't cover the ground with what I had, because what I had were hard, extremely hard, fast-traveling dogs. more so than most people would believe, but it's true. But anyway, I picked the tallest female that he had and got a female out of it. And she was a real good tree dog. She made a real good squirrel dog. And I made a cross on that. It's not in the dogs I've got, and it's not in what Wayne's got.
Okay.
Wayne's dogs don't carry it. What I've got in my yard don't carry it. But I did make that cross. And then a few years later, I hunted with some of these Busher Sam dogs, and I couldn't tell no difference in them. Them and those early leopards.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, when I showed them to Richard, I've got letters. He was real interested in it too.
Mm-hmm.
He told me he wanted to know what I was trying to accomplish by crossing those dogs, and told me by the time I accomplished it, I'd lose the leopard identity. And, and just a few years later, he's doing the same thing and calling them Camus curs. But all I was trying to do was to keep the dogs a little more of a cur dog and less of a hound.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, those dogs had some plot in them. Some of them right out of registered plots that had registered papers on them. They had registered, mountain cur in them.
Richard Bailey had a female named Penny, I believe, that was out of a Crockett bred plot and Nimrod.
Cindy. Yeah, named Cindy. She was a red brindle dog, right off of Isaiah Kidd's dog.
Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember exactly. I just knew it was a plot.
No, yes, but no. That's the only one that shows up in pedigrees, down through time. They had, a whole lot of dogs were in that to start with. And, this is of interest to me. A lot of those dogs, the breeding didn't pan out, so it really didn't matter what they were. If they didn't make, an extremely high caliber dog and reproduce it, they faded out of the scene anyway. Mm-hmm. But I went and got a dog out of the close of breeding mountain cur as to what Richard got from Dewey Ledbetter is, that I could find.
Yeah.
Well, right out of Tennessee Mountain Blondie and Baker's Brindle Bob and Cass Walker's Tud, which are, kind of the cream of the crop of the mountain cur, the Ledbetter mountain cur. But I did breed some of that back in. And years later, bred some dogs that carried some of that Busher Sam, if you were familiar with that.
Okay.
Cur breeding.
Mm-hmm.
These dogs were in Busher Sam. I hunted a lot of Busher Sam mountain curs. I was a member of the Mountain Cur Club for a pretty good while. I've trained dogs for years, and I trained a lot.
Okay.
Seen a lot of things in the mountain curs, but those Busher dogs, it's much like early leopards. You couldn't tell which were which.
Yeah.
Other than if they had leopard color, or maybe a little more hair on them.
I've also heard.
I found out later from Jimmy Hoover that those Busher dogs were half plot.
I was going to say I've heard that rumored that a lot of those Busher dogs were plots or plot crosses.
And a lot of people like to refer to a strain of mountain cur known as York strain of mountain cur. Well, there's no strain to it. There's a bear hunter out there by the name of Holland Lee York back in those days that crossed, that had grade plot bear dogs, might have had some registered one too that they took and bred to. And I quizzed all these people. I went out to Kenneth Jones's. He had dogs out of that Busher Sam dog, and I done some business with Glenn Overstreet that had the Busher Sam dogs in California. And when I quizzed Jimmy Hoover, I said, "Why are these dogs able to run as cold a track as any, hound?" And a lot of these other mountain curs are basically squirrel dogs. They might tree coon around a cornfield. When there's snow on the ground, you just ain't going to catch coon with them. And he said, a lot of people don't know this, but in the early days, the board of directors had permission to breed to anything they wanted on one side, as long as one side was for sure a mountain cur, and then used mountain cur papers.
Interesting.
To cover it. Now, people told me that, passed away, but I don't doubt it. The pedigree I put in my Pedwin program, and when I asked him, I said, "Well, give me the pedigree on these dogs, these Busher dogs." He said, "Well, do you want what's on the papers, or do you want the truth?" I said, "Well, I want it for breeding purposes because I'm putting it in a breeding program on the computer." And he had his mother-in-law sitting there, Dewey Ledbetter's widow,
Okay.
Went over all these names, so I'm sure I was getting the truth. But now a lot of those early mountain curs that were big type dogs that could run, were either out of a plot or a red bone or somebody's great hound out there.
Gotcha. Interesting. Conkeys Outdoors is proud to be a sponsor of Tree Talking Time.
Family, hunting, tradition is the Conkeys' motto. They understand the importance of passing down the tradition of hound hunting. They are a family-owned business that treats you like family. They also understand the importance of having the gear you need when you need it. Conkeys carries everything for your next hunt, and it ships to your door quick. They also offer great warranties on all tracking systems and financing options. Check them out at conkeys.com. You can also use the code TreeTalkingTime5 in all caps to save as well.
People probably, this is probably why people don't like for me to talk. I tell things that shouldn't be known.
Hey, we're so, far removed from it at this point, and there's been enough stuff that's been added behind the barn in the last 20 years that anything that happened 60 years ago isn't important.
Outdoor, ain't it? All out the door now, ain't it?
Yeah. That's why, I just like to know, though. I think it's very interesting.
Well, okay. Old Buck and Black Gal. Mm-hmm. O'Neill Bennett's old dog. Nobody knew like Richard. I mean, he the longer I look back, and I had disagreements with him, I didn't want exactly to came. I used to take trips with him, and he introduced me as a person that was going to carry on his breeding program when he couldn't. But I just didn't want the same kind of dog he did.
Okay.
The dog handle a little better and bark a little less. But he told me stuff, and when he would tell me, I think, well, that ain't nothing like I've heard or read. And these Carter dogs, A.W. Carter, sure you've heard of that.
Yep.
Well, I knew this man. They caught cows in this country. I'd seen Carter dogs work. I mean, it was a sight to watch, and they bred hound in them, so they weren't just like a Catahoula by no means. They were a houndier looking dog, and people around here referred to them dogs and they advertised them as circle and bay dogs.
Okay.
That's how they'd advertise them, circle and bay dogs. All you had to do is put them where a cow had been. They'd leave out, gone. And when they'd find them, they'd run the wind out of it and bail them up. And they'd go in on their horses and take corrals. And I've seen people do this for years around here. It's a sight to watch.
Yep.
Catch any cow there is. Ain't nothing they couldn't catch with them dogs. $200 a head. And you didn't catch it, you didn't pay them. But I asked Richard, I said, these dogs that you refer to as Carter dogs, I mean, I've seen his dog catch cows. I've seen them at stockyards. I said, they're not exactly the same. He said, well, old Buck, just half that. And I said, well, what's the other half? He said, black and tan. I said, well, you mean like them grade black and tans that your father had? And he said, no. He said they were most likely Wagner black and tan. If you're familiar with Hans Wagner, probably the most purebred coonhound ever been in this country were Wagner black and tans, which would explain why a lot of those dogs were black and tan, color and such.
Yep.
I mean, I had a man call me up maybe 10 or 12 years ago, and I tracked that breeding all the way back to old Buck. And he said, well, what's Buck out of it? And I said, well, he's out of an A.W. Carter dog and a black and tan. And I told him it was that, he hung up on me. He said, you mean I've listened to all this about curs and they got hound in them?
Well, yeah.
Well, sure they got hound in them. Everything starts with something.
Yep.
Any breed of dog that can hunt and run a cold trail and do it naturally has got hound in them. All coonhound breeds come from foxhound, right?
Yep.
I mean, or bloodhound, one of the two. There's no other source. Foxhounds are like 49% bloodhound and 51% greyhound. Right?
Never heard that.
American foxhounds. Sure. This is all documented.
I don't know much about
purest hound in this. Well, foxhounds are, you can track them back pedigree for hundreds of years. They're a purebred dog, but foxhounds in Europe derive from crossing greyhounds on to scent hounds.
Okay.
And coonhounds in America either come down from black and tan, the old black and tan type of bloodhound type dog, or either that or the foxhounds that were imported over here, like the brookhounds. All stuff's out there, but I mean, most of the coonhounds in this country are what people call pot liquor. Had a little of this and that and the other, and didn't have no papers on them.
Yeah.
And tree and walkers and plots and all that stuff, came into being not too awful many years ago.
Exactly.
And So leopard curs were not too far behind, but they got a lot of hound in them. I'm getting off track here on you, I'm sure.
That's all right.
Probably not what you'd want to put on a podcast if they got a lot of hound in them to start with.
I don't care if you don't care.
Oh, I mean, you know, I've always been. I've had a lot of people through the years, so I wouldn't have none of that Dutchman Creek breeding in it. He talks about having mountain cur in them. Well, then they may as well say he wouldn't have nothing Rich Effie ever had.
Exactly.
Because his first litters are out of a, brindle mountain cur.
No, and I mean,
I didn't.
The Leopard wasn't a purebred dog, so I mean, what were you going to cross? What were you going to cross these dogs to? You had to cross them to something.
Sure.
So, and what do you think cur dogs throughout the South were? They were all mixed up hound crosses.
Yeah.
Hounds, bird dogs, stock dogs.
Collie and shepherd, bulldog, just a little of that and the other. Bred on to, first hounds, like I say, were, foxhounds evolved into coonhound. And probably some of the earliest curs. And that country down there, eastern North Carolina, is bobcat and gray fox hunting heaven, has been for 100 years. All them early coon hunters and all them leopard breeders down there probably done more bobcat hunting than they did coon hunt.
Okay.
And people down there, I got to know July breeders. And a lot of them old Julys that them people bred to hunt down the eastern part of the state. People see them, they'd swear there's a leopard cur. Swear to it. They had more hair, more of them leopard colored. They've been bred for 100 years to run gray fox and bobcat in that dense brush down there, to breed a smaller dog and a daytime hunting dog, not what you'd run red fox with, or not what you'd run, in a field trial type. But,
yeah.
I got to know some gentlemen that had those dogs 60, 70 years, and their father had before them, and, just common sense tells me those dogs got some of that in them. I've had them, people come to my house and swear I had some old leopard blood there, keeping a secret. I'd say, no, they're red Julys, pedigree on them. But I know, and I did make a cross or two on that, and it was a good thing.
Okay.
Real good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Real good thing. That was not real long ago. That's 25 years ago, I guess. But
okay.
The biggest mystery in that breed is where Richard got Nimrod and his litter mates in it.
So the story of going to Mexico is not legit?
Well, I've got handwritten letters from Richard. I've got handwritten letter from a man by the name of B.T. Williams, Cowboy Williams, lived in Texas. That Richard got them from Boy Williams. Okay. And Cowboy tells me that a man by the name of O.H. Bates bred them, Orville Bates. But, a lot of people say, well, I tried to tell you they're just Catahoula cross on hand. Well, no, that's not what they were either. I'd swear if a man done DNA, there's probably no Catahoula in them dogs. If it was, it's a minute amount. People been breeding dogs for a long, long time.
Oh, yeah.
But whatever they were, and Richard didn't tell it to a long time. A man called me up one time, was talking about it. When I said something to Richard, he said, well, if his name was O.H. Bates, you can't believe a thing he said, and he don't know what he's got. He's just a dog trader. Later on, he told me that that's who he did, in fact, get those dogs from.
Okay.
I can't prove it, other than I've got both of them, saying it in their handwriting.
Mm-hmm.
And this O.H. Bates, I've got old Foxhound journals where he crossed dogs. One side of the pedigree say American Cur, and the other side say Goodman Foxhound, which is the same thing as a July.
Okay.
Pretty much. The Goodman's got more Walker in it than the July. But, they're leopard-colored running dogs that people hunted wolves and bobcat and stuff with.
Interesting.
What they were exactly, I don't know. But they did not come from Mexico. They did not, no old man and none of that stuff. It's just, it read good. It read good.
It was a good story.
Nobody can never, and I've known several people, so I can tell you exactly what they were. Had several people tell me their family bred them. A man lives in Texas, I believe his name's Haney. I don't know him. I spoke with him. And I've heard Randy Aller, I've been so far as Randy's put pedigrees on those dogs. Said he knew the man that Richard got them from.
I've heard that he has claimed that. I've only talked to him once, and he didn't tell me that, but I've heard that he's claimed that.
Well, The thing about it is, now I don't know exactly what they were, but I've been around a lot of cow dogs. Seen a lot of these leopard dogs that people use to catch wild cow, which are different than what most people call a Catahoula. But I've messed with a lot of dogs, and as years go by, I'm more and more convinced that's not what those dogs had in them to give them that color. For the simple reason, all of those dogs were colder nosed than any hound you'd ever see. Could run a cold track way better than any hound you ever see, much less a hound cross, the first generation of a cross. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And the pups off of them were like natural born coon dogs. Needed no training to get them to run and tree at all. It was just as natural as a foxhound running a fox. And you don't get that from cow dogs.
Yeah.
I've messed with a lot of them and seen people cross them, and you had a terrible time hunting them where they were stock. They had the instinct to want to work stock.
Well, I mean, that's just what they've been bred for, so why wouldn't it?
Sure, but no, those Nimrod dogs were, they were not that way.
Yeah.
They were not. They were as natural they were as natural born a coon dog as the best treeing walkers in this country are today.
Okay.
And after a lifetime of messing with dogs, that wasn't something that just happened. Somebody had been breeding those dogs for a very long time.
Yeah.
And it just didn't Cowboy Williams and Orville Bates shipped dogs all over the United States in the 50s and 60s. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they were in a position to see and get a hold of dogs very few people were. I mean, they made a living at it.
Yeah.
Made a living at it. Now, I can't tell exactly what they were, but I'm absolutely positive they were not Catahoulas. I'm absolutely positive of that.
That's a very common thought on leopards, even today. People are still like, oh, it's a Catahoula, or it's a Catahoula hound cross, or...
Yeah. Well, I've seen some, and no doubt some been put in them through the years, and no doubt some do. Some of the earliest dogs, like Hoosier Buck, come from Dan Reeves. I believe this dog come into the breed in 1961. I mean, he was older than Nimrod and those dogs.
Okay.
Richard got him from Dan Reeves, and Dan Reeves got him from Ross Porter in Iowa.
Okay.
Ross Porter, probably the oldest leopard breeder you can point a finger at and say there's a man that bred them for many years prior to registration office.
Okay.
That calico dog that Lewis Hensley had come through Dan Reeves from Ross Porter. And can kind of prove all of this through old full cry magazines. In the early 50s, a man by the name of Glenn Bixler wrote a column in Iowa, real famous tree and walker breeder. Had a dog by the name of Bixler, Supreme Sally. You ever heard of that name?
Nope.
You ever hear tell of a dog named Finley River Chief?
Yep.
Most famous tree and walker ever. Out of Supreme Sally, Glenn Bixler got this dog from Ross Porter. Same place these calico colored dogs.
Oh, interesting.
So, the same dogs. Mr. Porter told me the tree and walker breed was new, and if they come walker colored, they'd single register these dogs as walkers.
Interesting.
They had a very open single registration policy.
Yeah.
At that time.
Most breeds did at that point in time.
And Porter got dogs from a man in Willow Spring, Missouri, by the name of Jake Wolf in the 40s and 50s. Because it was in these columns, these real old columns, he'd say Porter come by today on the way to Missouri to get some more of them calico colored coon dogs. I've got all them old articles, but a lot of the Midwestern dogs and what people call Spring Valley breeding were not Spring Valley at all. They come from Ross Porter and Jake Wolf. And they've been breeding those dogs for years.
Interesting. I've never heard that. I've seen the Spring Valley stuff, just never knew where it came from other than what's on on papers. But then at some point, like you said, it just says unknown, ancestry or whatever.
Right. Mike Crawford's Cali and John England's Melody and Spring Valley Lep and Hoosier Butt and Hensley's Calico, all of those dogs come from Ross Porter's breeding.
Very interesting.
And he told an interesting story of what all they'd bred into them for years. They had fox dog in them. They had coon dog in them. They'd bred them for years and years.
Mm-hmm.
And did have a letter here a man wrote that knew about it that Richard got. He passed around it. About 2/3 of those dogs would come leopard colored. Some of them were chop mouth, some were ball mouth. But other than the dogs right around here, probably the biggest influence on the breed were those dogs there. And this Irish wilderness stuff, I'm sure you've read that in your books.
No, I haven't.
Where Spring Valley Leopard, where they say them dogs come out of the Irish wilderness.
I hadn't read that.
And there's those. I think Ross Porter and Jake Wolf, had bred that strain of dog for years. And I think that's
very interesting. Like I said, I had no idea.
That's way back.
Mm-hmm.
That's way back. All the stuff I'm familiar with. I was real curious as to where those dogs come from, because I've seen people for years and years try to recreate it, and you can't.
Mm-hmm.
Not in a short period of time. It don't hold up in breeding. It just don't hold up in breeding.
When's the book coming out?
The what?
The book. You've got all the information. We need a book.
I can't write.
Oh, you can write. If you can talk, you can write.
No, I can't. Well, unless I got something that can do it for me. I've got bad neuropathy, and I can't hold a pen. I can write my name. I can sign my name. And I can't hardly hold my fingers. I have to take one hand and hold the other tight.
We need to get somebody to help you out. If I was down there, I'd help you. All this information that you have.
I don't know that it's worth anything. I don't know I don't know the value of it in today's breed. You know what I'm saying? I'm afraid it's come to a point that what most people have today are a leopard hound, and if you go back over 20 years or 25 years, they people would scratch their head and say that doesn't have anything to do with what I've got. And if I was to put a description on those dogs, it wouldn't fit what people have today.
Yeah, I understand.
A lot of those dogs were bad-natured dogs. Bad-natured dogs would bite you. Would bite other people, would bite their owners. They weren't easy handling dogs to start with. You know what I'm saying?
Why is that?
I don't know why. I'm just saying the first ones I hunted with were that way.
Just curious. I didn't know.
I had for generations, and I'd say these dogs I've got today, if I still breeding them, if I was to shoot a coon, you couldn't go up and pick that coon up unless you wanted to bit. They were real possessive.
Okay.
They were possessive, and a lot of them were peculiar. A lot of those early dogs, they wouldn't have made competition dogs. They didn't like people they weren't familiar with.
That's a lot of cur dogs still today.
Well, actually, I'm not familiar with what's out there today.
No, I'm just saying.
Really not.
I've hunted with a good handful of mountain curs, and heck, a lot of mountain curs are peculiar. And I'm saying cur dogs in general, not just leopards, but
right. I think the more hound influence they got in them, probably the better they are around crowds of people and able to take out in the hunts of strange dogs and strange people. Some of the best I've had, wouldn't do good in competition hunts because they'd just be strange people and strange dogs every time you went. Not saying a good handler couldn't find individual dogs that do that.
Yeah.
And a lot of those dogs were used in packs, not individual dogs.
Mm-hmm.
That may have been something that's long gone.
I mean, like you said, the bear hunters and stuff, they still hunt them in packs, but otherwise most of your coon hunters they're at least going to single a dog out at least at times.
Right. Yeah, but in the early days in those leopard cur hunts, it weren't that way. People took half a dozen every time they went. Had a real roaring race. I don't even think coons run like that now.
Probably not, because they're not being run like that. Very interesting. A lot of stuff I didn't know.
Well, I don't know that it's would be any value of the breed today, but that's a lot of those early dogs. And Richard pretty much controlled the way that breed went because he controlled the registration office.
Mm-hmm.
The first pups I bought from him were off the Gold Nugget and a dog called Sweet Talk, which is totally different than the first generation or two of them. And that changed them a lot.
I've heard all kinds of things about the Sweet Talk line of dogs.
I got kind of wiped out of the dogs in the mid-70s. Dog thieves cleaned me out.
Jeez.
Seemed like they followed me around everywhere I went hunting and got every dog I had.
Yeah, gum. I guess back then hides were high.
Yeah. three of them at a time one night. We're looking across a creek from where we was trees and got every dog we had off a tree. And it was a mile back up the creek to the bridge we was parked at. And we were, headed back up the creek to go down. When we got up to where we were parked, they had dumped my cousin's dog out the truck. He was a yellow bobtail dog off of Sweet Talk. And I guess they didn't want him. And took every dog I had and never saw him again.
That's a shame. Sorry to hear that.
My Ranger dog, the person I had, he got stolen in the woods. I had another dog called Rango. He got stolen in the woods and never got him out. And I had 3 more got stolen like that. And had a couple stole out of my yard, all just in a few years.
Daggum.
And I got a dog after that by the name of Sam that I bought from Vernon Leggett. Vernon had about the same bloodline I did. Out of Nimrod and Elrod.
I would say Sam is probably one of your most well-known dogs, at least from my...
Sam?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's, I guess if you had it in one of these programs that ran as a stud dog, he'd probably have a big influence on the breed of any dog from this part of the country. Because everybody eventually breeding, went back to him. He was a real king dog. He was a good king dog. I was worried about him when he was young. I didn't think he'd keep up with the Tigger dog I had.
Okay.
That I got in the mountains. He
was he not as tall? Or?
Extremely fast. Well, Sam was not quite as tall. Tigger wasn't a big dog, but I bought him where he was trained up on 4,000-foot mountains.
Oh, okay.
And, yeah, he was a couple years old when I bought him. I mean, it was steep mountains. And dogs that were raised, and I bought quite a few dogs. I'd let people up there have them and give them back from them. Dogs that are trained up on 4,000, 5,000-foot highest mountains you can find. You bring them down 700-800-foot elevation, they'll outrun every dog trained down here. Walk off from them. Yeah.
Just because they're conditioned up there.
Sure. This dog I got in the mountain, he just caught coon left and right on the ground all the time down here. And one thing made Sam as good as he was, I trained him with that Tigger dog I bought in the mountain. And then I crossed my bloodlines with those 2 dogs, and I bought a female named Cleo out of the dogs I had that got stole.
Okay.
Bred to that.
Cool.
All of that bloodline I had went back to Richard McDuffie's and O'Neill Bennett's. And I bought dogs, had back through England's Little Lip, to the Missouri dogs, a little bit of that. I tried to keep it. I hadn't messed with Pedwin programs. My dogs run about 50% Nimrod and Elrod and Jezebel, maybe 25%, not as much later on, maybe 15% Buck and Black Gal.
Gotcha.
I tried to keep them line bred on that through the years.
I got my first dog from Brandon. I actually was able to trace my dog that I got from him back, to a lot of the foundation stock. So it's very interesting.
When I first met Brandon, he had a dog named Newt that he got from Lamar Meeks.
Yep.
It was a good dog.
Basically everything in his kennel has been line bred on Newt. So I've went down there and hunted with him a couple times, and we always treat coon.
You ever hunt with John Miles?
I have not. I've never met John. I've talked to him on the phone.
Bear hunting.
Yep.
I think he's a top-notch bear hunter in my book. Dog trainer. Yeah, I'm sure of it.
No,
I think he's trained a lot of bear dogs.
Both Brandon and Wayne have both talked highly of John. And like I said, I talked to him on the phone one time, but that was it. Never met him.
I'd go hunting with Wayne even if he didn't have dogs to catch nothing. He's just fun to be around.
Yes. He definitely is.
I need to go see him. It's a couple hour ride. Haven't been up there lately.
How old are you, Rex?
66.
Okay. Well, I wish you're.
I'm not all that old. I just grew up hunting with.
You started young.
With that breeder dog. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I was.
So that's why all the old timers have died off, and you're still around because you were, they were adults and you were a kid.
When I was 30 years old, I'd been raising dogs for generations and sold a lot of dogs. I trained dogs for a living, and people show up at my house and want to know where I was. They'd say, "Well, I'm expecting a bald-headed tobacco farmer or somebody, not you."
Yeah.
Oh, Lordy.
That's awesome.
I really took it for granted for the first many years, first half of that I, got to be good friends with the people that started that breed of dog.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and they told me things about those dogs that nobody knew. And I just don't know that it accomplishes anything to. Maybe it sounds better to say they come over from Spain and Hernando de Soto or purebred somewhere, you know, like. And I grew up hunting with plots. I mean, I've hunted with some of the best plots.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that are the backbone of the breed. I mean, extremely good plots. But
mm-hmm. Well, you're not too
far. I roamed all over the mountains researching those plots back in the 70s and 80s, and couldn't hardly find out nothing about them. And now it's just amazing all that stuff they come up with on them.
Yep. And I mean, a lot of them old plots, if you look back at old pictures and even some of the old accounts of them, a lot of them were more of a cur type dog.
Yeah, I've got a lot of old articles. First stuff I found on called them plot curs.
Mm-hmm.
I never could. I think some of those earliest mountain curs and plot curs and some of the ancestors of leopard curs, I think they're all pretty much the same.
I would agree with that.
Dog.
From everything I've read and seen, I haven't been in this nearly as long as you. I didn't get started when I was 12, 14 years old, but just from what a little bit of research I've done on these old cur dogs is, and I would say right around that 1950s mark is when people started going different directions and started registering stuff. But pre-1950s, I would say a lot of those dogs were all the same.
All the same, yeah. Even in them hound breeds.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you look back in old magazines, you'll see bushy-haired walkers.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Short-eared, you know. Yep. I mean, they weren't such purebred dogs back at that time either.
Yep.
And red bones. There used to be red bones around this part of the country when I was a boy. People used them for rabbit dogs, you know, daytime possum dogs at night. Don't look like what's around today.
Well, and a lot of stuff, they got called whatever by what color they were. Like you said, a tricolor dog was a walker dog. A blue tick was a blue tick colored dog. I mean, it didn't mean it was a purebred blue tick like today. It means it was a blue tick colored dog.
That's right.
So
that's right.
I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me and talk, and I really appreciate this, and I'd like to do it again at some point.
Well, I'll be glad to give you some facts on, you know, I've got stuff wrote down I probably couldn't remember off the top of my head. I've collected that stuff all my life. But
so, thank you very much, Rex.
Well, I appreciate you calling. Write me a letter sometime. I'll try to write you one back.
Sounds good.
Right, thank you.
You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Tree Talking Media. And until next time, keep them talking in the timber.